Today I have a note from Kevin Kelly responding to the video that we did about $15,000. Can you get a house here in Nicaragua for that price? And of course you can, but understanding what that house would mean, what a lifestyle around that house would mean, and the limitations that you're imposing on yourself are important things to contextualize. And Kevin lives here in Nicaragua and has been in and out for quite some time, and he has some insight. And I thought it'd be good to share his letter with you and some of my feedback on his letter. So this was posted. You can see it on the community. I'm going to read it to you right after the bump. All right, welcome to the show. We were doing some work on old thumbnails today, and let me tell you, having done this show daily or nearly daily for a really long time, chronicling my entire journey of preparing to move to Nicaragua, our first year of moving in, and then all of our time kind of growing and running businesses and becoming residents, it's going back and looking at some of those old episodes for our own edification or to do some cleanup, try to improve how they were done, what little bits we can, is really neat. It's cool to have so much history online that we're able to go back and enjoy and see what we looked like, what we were doing, what places we were at looked like back then. It's really interesting. All right, so in the recent video, we did a can you get a house between $10,000 and $15,000 here in Nicaragua, whether you're buying one that pre-exists or if you can build one, and if you do that, what would that look like? What would a $15,000 house be like? We didn't show any, but we actually have a number of videos that go through houses in this price range, mostly on the high side for obvious reasons, but we have looked at, for example, houses that are brand new, listing at $15,900. I realize that when you're at $15,000, an extra $900 is a noticeable percentage over the number that you're looking at. But those are houses plus lots, pre-built with profits built in. If you're building your own, doing your own management, getting a lot really cheaply, being super frugal, customizing just for you, minimizing to exactly what you need, it's possible, right? At $15,900, you're talking about decent, safe, guarded HOA kind of condo communities. You're buying a lot in that, which is slightly higher price than you would be able to get potentially outside. And you're getting a 2-bedroom, 1-bath that's bigger and more complicated than a studio, which my friend who has a $13,000 house was able to do a studio style. That means just a bathroom and an open room with all the other things in that room for a bit less. And he did it near a beach. So those numbers are potentially doable, but it's easy for a lot of people, I think, to get the wrong impression. People start to say, well, if you can go that cheap, I need to go that cheap. And I think a lot of people make mistakes here, and I think that's what Kevin wants to share. So I want to share his insight, but I think that there's a happy medium. I think he has some important points, but I think he's missing some as well. So let's read his letter. And before I read this, I just want to preface that I do know he lives in the San Juan del Sur area, exactly where, I'm not sure, but it is a premium area with a higher cost of living. So let's get to his letter. I think people are getting too caught up on trying to live on lower budgets in Nicaragua. It is true if you take buses, it's cheaper. If you eat tortillas and cheese and beans and rice for your meal, you can live a low-budget lifestyle. We've been coming for 11 years or so and like to have a car to drive around. We like to eat out a lot at nicer places to eat, and even in the grocery stores, we like to use seasonings and love to cook nice meals. We just bought a home, and honestly, we are noticing that we are going to have almost the same budget as we had in Texas. The electricity costs are more, and honestly, we have been shocked to find a lot of the things we like and enjoy are actually more expensive in Nicaragua than in the States. Have you priced the apples here? The other issue is almost every time we cook or go out to eat, we tend to have at least one local family with us, so even eating out is more expensive than if we were in the United States, but it's nice to bless families that it's a rare luxury to eat out like we do and get to witness crazy appreciation for it. Something else we've noticed at the grocery stores or restaurants, to pay for a person's groceries or a meal behind us in line usually leads to shock, awe, and tears, so that adds up as well. Apparently that is almost never seen or experienced here. My buddy Isaac lived here for almost a year and went broke many times. He couldn't help but to bless people. On the $15,000 budget for a home, we were looking at large acre farms. The issue almost every time we found something, the land is pretty expensive. Even finding something out in the country to be that low of a price is almost like they would be looking next to a trash dump area or an extremely dangerous part of the country. I just wouldn't recommend it unless you're used to living a rough lifestyle already. To top it off, these viewers are not only talking about a rougher lifestyle, but in a foreign country. I definitely recommend, instead of buying something like that, to figure out a good rental budget. Even $350 a month can get you a decent place, and that's 3.5 years of rent paid in a comfortable home in a comfortable area. One of my friends pays $350 a month for security guard in a gated community with two stores inside the community. The police chief lives there, a pilot, and several other high-end locals. We minister and help feed families in very hard-hit poor areas out in the country. And there are plenty of homes out there for $15,000, but I couldn't see any foreigner that can afford to buy an international plane ticket would want to live there. The other thing we notice is the rent is always crazy cheaper than actually purchasing a home. The only reason we purchased a home in Nicaragua was it was a highly sought after tourist area with a high Airbnb filling in the neighborhood. My treat is going to the barber often. They're extremely good at their job. My wife is excited about hair colors, cuts, massages, and nails. That kind of stuff is crazy in the States and something she did very rarely. That stuff is much cheaper here. Going to the barber for a haircut and straight shave was $30 to $50. Here in Nicaragua, it has been as low as $2 and as expensive as $6. Tips are like they would be handed $100 bills. Okay, so he has some points here, and it is important to understand that when coming to Nicaragua, there are two groups of people that typically come here, and we can often break things into two groups, but in this case, there are those who come to Nicaragua because they're looking for a way to get extreme luxury and are willing to pay outrageous premiums because they're not looking to adapt, or not that they want to avoid adaptation, but that's not what they're looking to do. They're looking to be able to get a level of luxury that they may not be able to afford somewhere else, and that is one crowd. And so we see that quite often, that there's a number of people who have plenty of money. They can live wherever they want. They don't have to come to Nicaragua. They're not coming here because it's cheap. They're coming here for opportunity. They just really like the weather. They love, whatever they discovered. But money isn't the factor. And not that it's not a factor. Everybody pretty much benefits from lower cost of living, but it's not a huge factor. Maybe not a significant one, maybe not one that they consider. And then you have another group who tend to pick Nicaragua because it is the lowest cost place to live in the Western Hemisphere, especially if you're coming from North America, because tickets are so cheap, the ability to drive exists, imports are not a big deal, and so forth. And so you have these two very varying views on what Nicaragua is like, and you tend to get, in most of the country, people who are budget conscious. You also get the people who just really love Nicaragua and want to integrate at pretty much any cost, but they're the rarity. It's great, but it's the rarity. Most people who are in the majority of Nicaragua are on some type of budget. That doesn't mean that they don't love Nicaragua. That doesn't mean that they're not completely dedicated to integrating, but they're not picking Nicaragua for the purpose of integrating. They're not like going out of their way saying, I have to be in Nicaragua. I would pay anything. Oh, it's cheap. Awesome. That's a bonus, right? Generally, that's not the case. So they're coming here because it's affordable, because they can't afford to live somewhere else. And so they're looking for Nicaragua because they have to. They have to look for where their money is going to go the farthest, because they're never going to get to a point where they can have a second house. They're never going to get to a point where they can buy a car. They're never going to get to a point where they can go out to eat every day. Those things are never going to be. It doesn't matter where they are. They can't go to Southeast Asia and do that. They can't go to East Africa and do that. They can't be in the highlands of Malawi and do that. No, it's not going to happen. So they need to maximize their budget, because whatever they spend, they're hoping to have a little bit better housing, a little bit better food, a little bit more food, a little bit better public transportation, and so forth, so that cutting the budget to the absolute minimum is really important for a lot of those people. And then many of them come to Nicaragua and discover that it's amazing, and some come and are very bitter for obvious reasons, that some because they don't want to be where they are, but some because they feel trapped. And that's not a great place to be. You don't want to be in a situation where you feel trapped, but unfortunately they're going to, in that situation, feel trapped anywhere. That's not going to change because they're financially strapped and making their decisions based on what they feel they have to do, and that may be completely accurate. For those who have plenty of money and can just spend money like crazy, then it's not a big deal, and you're looking at things completely differently. So it's important to understand the context here. Now, Kevin is living in a wealthy enclave. It's a tourist area, so his perspective on Nicaragua is completely different. He also, and this is a really important thing from the things he said, he's getting gringo priced. He's in an area where he's not experiencing what the real prices are in Nicaragua. So he notices, he'll say things like, you can get a decent place with guards for $350, but in the rest of Nicaragua, you can get a decent place with guards for $150, and you can get an even bigger one for 2. Now, it may not be as luxurious as what he's talking about. That person may be getting a really good deal, but you certainly don't need to go to 350 to get those kinds of things in Nicaragua. That's more than double what we show on the channel for places Americans would generally be willing to live in. Not the average American is going to be seeking it out, but we're talking about two very different groups of people. He's talking about people who are able to spend money rather loosely, aren't worried about their future budgets. You'll notice he says, well, at 350, that's a rental for 3.5 years. And that's absolutely true. But if you're buying a place for 15,000, you're not looking at that as a 3.5 year investment. You're looking at that as a 10 to 30 year investment in most cases. If you're buying, you should always be having that decades mindset. This is 20 years. I'm going to live in here for 20 years. That's where it's going to save me money. And that $350 rent is going to be a killer over that time frame, if that's what you need to do. And with your own house, if you bought one or built one for $15,000, presumably if you had any extra money per month, you could use it to fix it up. And even if you're not spending very much to fix it up, you could put your own labor in to fix it up in ways that wouldn't make sense with a rental, whether it's building a garden, putting in a new path outside, eventually building a patio out of driftwood that you collect, whatever it is you're going to do, your labor, your time, or your additional money can go into your property and protect it. Rather than if you're spending that on a rental, it's just more money lost in the rental. Now, I know I often push people towards rentals. Not that many as a percentage of people who are coming to Nicaragua are actually on a budget so tight that they have to buy a $15,000 house. So if you're in that completely cash-strapped position, you need to come down and make good decisions. There's never going to be an exception to that. You need to put in the time to make sure you're going to be in the right place, that you're building the place correctly, that you're not getting gringo priced, and so forth. But you need to come down and make wise decisions so that you can put a house in that is going to be something that's going to work for you. So first of all, you need a house that's going to work for you. Is it going to have enough space? Is it going to have working sewage? Is it going to have running water? Is it going to be able to get electric? Is it going to hook up to the internet? All those kinds of things. You got to make sure that you're getting a spot that's actually going to work for you. And then you need to make sure that's in a spot that's actually going to be appropriate for you. Is it near the right city, the right part of the country? Does it have the right weather? Is it accessible to places that you need to go? Do you need to get to the airport frequently? Things like that. Is it big enough for you? Is it going to hold up to the weather? Is it just going to be a place that you like long term? There's a lot of things you want to make some decisions about. And I realize a lot of people can do that relatively quickly, but you need to do it carefully because you're committing to a place for a large portion of your life. Your house is one of the most important things in your life. You don't want to rush into that and make a hasty decision, especially if you don't have the liquidity, the financial resources to simply move to another one. So that's important. And a lot of people really need to live on these really tight budgets. We have so many people who are moving here with budgets in the $1,000 per month range. And this is something that I think Kevin is really missing. Being as affluent as he is, he's looking at the world through this very rich lens, because look at the things he's talking about, importing food from the United States and so forth, which if you can afford it, of course, absolutely go for that. But when you're living in these really, really tight budgets, if you're in the United States, you couldn't possibly live at sub $1,000 a month. And now here in Nicaragua, you're required to have at least a pension of $1,000 a month officially to try to get a long-term residency. But for a lot of people, just because you may be able to show that you have $1,000 doesn't mean you feel comfortable being able to budget spending $1,000 a month. So a lot of people are in that $800, $900 per month range. And when you're in that range, the difference between a $150 per month rental and a $350 per month rental is massive. Right? You can't throw away $200 a month, even though it would be way more luxurious. You may love the spot. You may not be able to have a place with a gated guard or whatever. And if you're building a spot, let's say for $15,900, that's what rents at about $145, I believe. If you have the necessary cash reserves to purchase the house instead of paying rent, over time you're going to save money. Of course, many people who are living on that kind of budget don't have the cash reserves and can't do that, but many actually do. They have a lump sum for retirement, especially those coming from Canada, I understand, because their insurance system works a little bit different than Americans do. So Americans get more per month. Canadians get more to work with all at once. It's just a different system. But that's important to understand that sometimes you have Canadians who are coming down. That's the majority of the expats that we get here. And they may have a lump sum that they're working with. And many people have a lump sum that they may have access to or be able to borrow from family to get, let's say, $16,000 $10,000, which is enough to get a freestanding house in a nice community with guards, right? And not have to have that $145 per month rental. And that savings every month could be the difference between being able to really afford it or not. Because even though if you're going to amortize the purchase of that house over, say, 20 years, you're going to find that it's far less than that $145 a month. It may be more like $120 a month, $110 a month. Maybe you get really lucky and it's under $100 per month. It's still going to be cost, right? You still got maintenance to do. You still have things to do, but it shouldn't come up to, if being done properly, the price that you'd be paying as a rental. So if you know you're going to be staying in a place and you're able to get a deal like you can now in Nicaragua, buying is going to be the way to go, because buying a place, building less so, but there's still deals there. But buying a place that's pre-existing gives you the maximum buying power. Renting gives you the worst right now. That doesn't mean you shouldn't rent. We push renting a lot. There's a million reasons why most people should be renting, but if you're in that absolute trying to squeak by price point, buying is one of the secrets that if you can commit to the location, to the property and everything, and you are okay for decades being there, you're going to beat the rental market almost always. We're in a position where that makes sense here. And you notice that you can see it in the rent numbers. The rents are good, but they're not as good as the purchase prices. And that's why people are often shocked. And it just varies by what the market is doing at any given time. When there is tons of houses on the market and there's a demand and people are buying really quickly, the price of houses goes up. Renting tends to become cheaper. When there's a surplus of houses on the market and a lot of them are just left empty and people have given up on selling and the sales prices are collapsing, then renting tends to become more expensive because the houses are so cheap. They fluctuate. They are tied together, but one will lead the other about 50% of the time. So you just have to be aware. But for most people coming to Nicaragua, it doesn't matter what that is. Renting is what makes sense for the majority of people because you don't have enough knowledge of the market. You don't know what you're doing. You have so many risks and unknowns compared to your home market. Like I'm from the United States. If I was going to live in Western New York and I knew I was going to live in Western New York, I can very easily pick the town I'm going to live in, find a house that I want to have, purchase it, and be really sure that I pick the right town, right neighborhood, right view, right house, right style, and all that, and work with that and save money over time. When coming to Nicaragua, even now, I struggle with, I've been here for 10 years, and my knowledge of the country isn't as good as my knowledge of Western New York, where I grew up. My knowledge of houses and construction and all that stuff isn't as good as Western New York, where I grew up. And so when you put all that together, even though I could buy here and do reasonably well, I won't do as well as I would in my home market. My risks are higher, my cost as a ratio to the normal market is higher. And so for me, even though I know the market decently well, put in a lot of time, and am an investor here, I still have benefits to renting that a Nicaraguan would not, or someone who needs to stay in the same house for a long time would not. So it's important to understand that Kevin's opinion on rentals and stuff is coming from an affluent. If you have loads of money, then you probably shouldn't be trying to get into a $15,000 house. But that probably goes without saying. However, it is worth noting that many people are coming to Nicaragua and do have enough money to spend it. And when they hear how low the prices can be, we see this a lot. They lose their minds and start looking for prices that are completely absurd. Like we're talking about what is the cheapest you could possibly get a house. That means the cheapest land, the cheapest construction, the fewest features. Like this is so unbelievably pushing the limits of what minimalist would be. And then people jump to, oh, can I do that in some like luxurious city center? Can I do that on the beach? Can I do that in the highest cost areas? No, because it's part of the, how much can you scrimp by? How much can you give up? And you're giving up everything to get to the lowest price. Obviously, the lowest price is the lowest price. Anything that you say that's desirable is going to raise the price. That doesn't mean that it's unaffordable to be on the beach. My friend who has a place that was $13,000, he had to build it himself. He had to do a ton of work. He had to get it when the prices were super low. He had to construct before the price of construction went up slightly. Could he do it for less than $15,000 today? I don't know. But he did it for $13,000, and he did it near but not in the beach, like it's on a barrio. Backwards. Not on a beach, in a barrio. But if that's okay with you, you're going to spend more than if you did it out in the country. But it can be done. But so many people come down and say, well, if houses are that cheap, that's what I want, and they go for the cheapest. And that is, Nicaraguans are generally not doing that. Most Nicaraguans are spending more than that when they're looking at these places. If they're making $800-900 per month, they don't want to get a $15,000 house. They want a $20,000 to $25,000 house because it's got more space, it's got more finishes, it's just more comfortable, and you're going to be, in many cases, people start pushing these limits in really illogical ways. If you were to go to, say, you wanted to get a rental home or a vacation home on a lake somewhere in Minnesota, or maybe in the Alabama waterfront on the Gulf of Mexico, and you're coming down, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna get this kind of vacation home. And you say, what is the price range in these areas? And they're like, well, you can get this shack for $50,000 that happens to be in an area you want, but it is like, it's bad, it's in a bad neighborhood, it's a shack, it's everything. And then on the high end, you can spend a couple million. Very few people jump to, all right, let's get a shack, let's go. And they're gonna be like, but can't you afford like a house with like doors and locks and a like safe neighborhood? It wouldn't be that bad, maybe 150,000, 200,000. People are like, yeah, but 50,000, I can't pass up a $50,000 shack. Like, and that's how people tend to react to Nicaragua. They'll come down. Now, if you're on that tight budget and you're coming because you cannot afford to live otherwise, then absolutely getting a safe, very, very basic home for 15,000. Absolutely, then that's what you need to do. And I want to point out that one of our viewers recently probably got a place for more like 30,000, but managed to get one of those studio houses, managed to get a really large walled lot, managed to get a second structure, which isn't worth very much, but some, had a big, nice kitchen, but loads of space, parking, enough to open a business, and is 2 lots off of the beach for pretty close to 30,000. Now again, all kinds of different numbers. Every situation is different, but these are the kinds of numbers that are out there, and it's so easy to hear really good numbers and overlook the limitations that come with it. So it's really important to understand that things are cheaper in Nicaragua by far. Any time that someone says, "No, it's almost as expensive," nope, they've been gringo priced by a lot. In most cases, right? They've been completely hoodwinked as to what it costs to do things. You can build cheaper here, materials are cheaper, labor is so much cheaper, land is cheaper, everything's cheaper. But if you come down with the wrong mindset, it's really easy to get gringo priced, and many gringos will actually fall for, because there's many other gringos pushing this narrative, right? Well, I got this much, it must be that much for you. They don't want you to pay 1/3 what they did, so people will support this narrative of things are expensive. And so especially if you get into an enclave, you could easily end up being misled by that. So it's very dangerous. That's one of the reasons why we have this channel, is to get that information out there so you know that these low-cost things do exist. But then you can take it and say, well, what would normal be like? What would I actually want to spend? And the reality is that if I was going to buy a house in one of these little neighborhoods, yeah, I would consider it, but I'd probably spend a lot closer to 28,000, maybe even 32,000 to get a larger, more comfortable house that has more space for me, that has the finished walls, that has the sealed off roof, that I can easily put air conditioning in, and so forth, and a little bit bigger yard or whatever. That's double the money. So that's important to mentally have that picture of, okay, the very lowest cost versus what is reasonable. And it's also worth mentioning that many people live for free in Nicaragua. They just take some spot under a tree, lean up some stuff, and sit there for a long time, and eventually people assume it's their land, and kind of at some point it does become their land because no one else is using it, no one's concerned about it, they're not taking very much space, and they haven't built much of anything. Loads and loads of the country has people living in abject squalor, and when we're talking about a house of 15,000, we're talking about a house as we would define it, with concrete walls and a door that locks. There's a lot of people who are living in what are basically advanced lean-tos. They may have posts on the walls and they lean up sheet metal around it, and they kind of make a door/gate thing, and it's just dirt, and it's kind of outdoors and kind of isolated so that when it rains, it doesn't pour in on them. And normally there's like a bathroom-ish thing, and sometimes there's electric, but that's real. Now, the people who are living like that are often, that space may be worth $1,000 or $2,000, the entire thing. It's all about perspective. But you have to understand what you're talking about as far as prices and such. So it's important not to jump to this excitement that houses are available at $15,000 unless you're in a position where you have to get a house at that price, and this is what's going to let you live, then yes, it should be extremely exciting. But then let's talk about the other side, because Kevin jumped to some really big numbers here, and I want to talk about these because there's a bunch of stuff I think here that is misleading, because it really is much lower cost here. But if you're looking at it wrong, it's easy to perceive it very different. He says, it's true, if you take buses, it's cheaper. Well, that's how people live in Nicaragua, right? So of course, and because the buses are safe and convenient and go all over the place, you want to use them at least part of the time. I use them part of the time. I own multiple vehicles, 4, I think, currently. We're looking at getting a 5th, but we still take buses. Why? Because it's fast and safe and convenient and easy and culturally part of the picture. Now, of course, we have cars partially for the business, and sometimes you want the flexibility of a car. So I totally understand, and you may want a car too. Also important, cars are cheaper here than in the U.S. It seems strange, but we're getting really good deals here, especially now that we're able to get really cheap cars from China that are higher quality than you're getting in the United States, more modern than you're getting in the United States, at lower price than you're getting in the United States. And we're able to get brand new cars. I think Paul just bought one for around $21,000, brand new, very nice, from Japan. And, great car, can't even begin to touch that in the United States. He says, if you're eating tortillas and cheese and beans and rice, yes, if you're eating Nicaraguan food. Now, of course, you can get into really low budget, which is kind of what he's throwing out. And this is something to be worried about, though, is this kind of like, well, if you go extreme, you can low, right? This starts to sound like the trapped wife scenario, right? And Kevin's not going that far, but it's important to understand that there's this panic response that people are often not wanting to adapt and then perceive that lack of adaptation to that it's expensive. That is not true. If you were to do this in reverse, Nicaraguans would say America is very expensive, right? Except by orders of magnitude. Why? Because the same factors that would make Nicaragua seem expensive to American makes America unreal to a Nicaraguan. He says he's been coming here for 11 years, like to have a car to drive around. Okay, like that's a luxury thing. And like to go out and to a lot of nicer places to eat. Well, imagine saying that in the United States, right? Oh, we go to really fancy restaurants all the time. Okay, and that's going to be super expensive. But if you have the money, absolutely, it's a great way to support the economy and the businesses. Now, of course, most of these in the area are American-owned, so it's not supporting it as much as other things, but that's great. Go do those things, right? And go to the grocery stores and get seasonings and all those kinds of things. Of course, we do that, right? But we're still doing it at much lower cost than in the United States, right? It's still not as expensive unless we're trying to exactly replicate, right? You can never go to a new country and replicate. That is always higher price and never matters, right? If you were trying to replicate Nicaraguan lifestyle in the United States, it would also be very expensive. So that's not a fair comparison. You have to compare relatives to relative, right? What is food here like, food there like, and so forth. One of the reasons that pizza is not super expensive in the United States is because cheese is subsidized and it's all the ingredients are locally made. It's food based on locally made products. We don't have the same products here in Nicaragua. So making a pizza that tastes like an American pizza is very hard. We have to bring in those things from the United States or from Italy. But we can make pizza that's very good here. It's just different. It's a different style because we're using local ingredients and so forth. But if you wanted to make that Nicaraguan pizza in the United States, it would be very expensive again because they don't have those ingredients and so forth. So this is important to point out. He's pointing out that it got expensive because he likes to go to fancy restaurants here. Well, of course, you can make it expensive. You could buy a house instead of renting. You could buy a big house. You could live in an enclave. You could do all kinds of things that raise the cost to come up with ways to make it more expensive. But then you have to compare it to, well, if I was in the United States and I decided to live in Beverly Hills, would it be costly? Yes, you're comparing that kind of thing. So you want ocean view. You want to be in Malibu, maybe not now, but in general, you want to be in some place like Malibu with ocean views and what would it cost in the United States? 10 million, 15 million to get started. Is that what it costs here? Not even close, right? So there's no comparison in price. There's no way to make any kind of claim that there's a similar price. And that's a lot of people jump to this because they're making outrageous comparisons, right? Super luxury and super not acclimated in Nicaragua to living in America and doing the normal thing that everyone does, right? So people often compare, getting a suburban house in Dallas, Texas, that's where I came from, right? So it's really tempting to be like, how much did my house cost in Dallas? Well, by the time we sold it, it was like $250,000 maybe. And then when we moved here, did we buy a place here that cost that much? No, we actually didn't. We ended up going from 3 bedrooms up to 9 bedrooms. We went from a small lot in a suburb to actually a lot that was probably really close to double the size, still not very large, on the ocean, literally oceanfront. We went from a tiny little kitchen to an industrial kitchen. We went from a 2-bath to I believe, 10-bath, right? Like all kinds of things changed. But we did go from a 2-car garage to no garage, so there was losses as well, right? But it's important to understand that we didn't move from a suburban house with X square footage to another suburban house with X square footage. We went from a smaller place to a larger place, from a suburban, nothing nondescript place to a waterfront, Pacific oceanfront on the sand place, from, very little you can do with it to a lot you can do with it, to not licensed as a business to licensed as a business, and so forth. And we spent less in doing so, right? So, I mean, the degree to which you can't compare the prices is insane, but the risk of being tricked into gringo prices is so high that people coming will say, well, I had 250,000 in this, so this place, it must be more. So getting someone to say, well, it must be worth $1 million, $2 million, $3 million is easy, and people will fall for that. And then you'll get this story that things cost more, and it's a dangerous thing to repeat. He says, we just bought a home, and honestly, we were noticing we were going to have almost the same budget as we had in Texas. Budget, this is important. I guarantee that his oceanfront place here is not as nice as his oceanfront place in Texas. I guarantee his views are better here, that it's a much more premium spot, and so forth. He says the electricity costs more. It does not for us. Every place we've tested here, the electricity has been cheaper. No matter what we do, it's been less than we were in Texas. We pay less here for a 9-bedroom with air conditioning than we did in Texas for a 3-bedroom with air conditioning, for example. I know we're doing so much more here. We have staff here, we have offices here, all those things are added into the budget. So while it's close, we're doing 2-3 times as much with the things here than we did in Texas. All right, that's what people are always overlooking. I know that the electricity is not actually, from a practical sense, more expensive here. We've been shocked to find out that a lot of things we like and enjoy are actually more expensive in Nicaragua than in the States. Have you priced the apples here? I think this shows, and this is important for Kevin to understand, this is how much he's missing the context of where he is, right? Apples, which grow in the United States and are the most abundant fruit, and famously the cheapest place in the world to get apples is like Iran and the United States, right? That's where they come from. Iran originally, and the United States is where they are super popular and grow absolutely everywhere. Thank you, Johnny Appleseed. Right? The entire country is covered with apples. I can go grab apples off of any tree anywhere in the United States and eat. I don't need to go to a store. I grew up, there were 1,000 apple trees, just wild. I didn't have to go plant one. I didn't have to sneak into an orchard, nothing like that. I could just go find an apple tree. They're everywhere. They're like weeds. And so apples are extremely cheap in the United States because that's where they come from. Then if you want to have them in Nicaragua where they don't grow, you have to import them from the United States. So someone has to go in the United States, get that apple at the full U.S. price, package it, ship it overseas. It's food, it will perish. Have to put up with the risk of perishment or damage. And then put it up in a store where people aren't familiar with apples and sell it to Nicaraguans. It is impossible to expect that it would be anywhere close to the price it would be in the place of origin once you have to pick it and ship it and do all these things and take on all this risk. Of course, it's going to cost more because you're importing exotic foreign fruit. Now, let's switch that into a market where there's no demand for it. Let's flip that. How much are the fruits that we get here in Nicaragua costing in the United States? Go price out soursop and pineapple and papaya and guava and guanabana and many others, jicaro and stuff like that, and see how much they cost in the United States. And I guarantee that they cost so much more. Right, because in one case, he's comparing the local produce in the United States to foreign exotic produce in Nicaragua. So that's okay, understandably, he's trying to recreate his American lifestyle, but no one should be coming and expecting to recreate a lifestyle anytime you move to a new country. That's not what you do unless you are aware that that's what you're trying to do, and you know you're going to pay a premium because you're importing it. He's not getting the lifestyle from Nicaragua, in the case of apples. It's coming from the United States. So he's buying it in the United States and shipping it here, or having someone do that for him, which is completely fine. I buy apples here too. Sometimes I have a hankering for apples, so we get them. And the cost of living is so much lower that the cost of apples never makes it noticeably more expensive. But we do notice when looking directly at an apple that the apple costs more here than it would in the United States. So yes, it is nice that we have local fruit that we use all the time that is so cheap that it's basically free. For example, we have like unlimited avocados and limes here, but price those out in the United States. They're definitely not free, but here we're always getting them for free. Loads of them, baskets of them, bushels of them. So much free produce here that you really have to understand that you're in a different country and you can't price out comparative versus a different country's local stuff, right? This is wild comparisons that no one would make, because if you make it in reverse, right? I need exactly what I ate in Nicaragua in the United States. People are going to be like, how can it cost this much, right? So it's only because you're going in one direction that it can make it sound like it's kind of expensive. He says, the other issue is almost every time we cook or go out to eat, we tend to have at least one local family with us. But do you do that in the United States? And if not, why not? Right? And it's fine that you want to give money away, but he's basically saying, we've decided because we're so rich and everything is so easy and so cheap, that they're giving money away and buying stuff for people. That's fantastic. Absolutely do that stuff. That's wonderful. But accept it for what it is. You're describing just how inexpensive it is here. And saying that by you're able to go out to luxury restaurants instead of normal restaurants, presumably. You're bringing people and feeding them with you. You're probably going out to eat more often. And with all that, it's only coming out to that double, triple, quadruple spend is only coming out to being about the same price as you had in the United States. So that's really important to, what he's really doing is describing how cheap it is here, but couching it in a way that makes it sound like it's not that cheap. He says something else we've noticed at grocery stores or restaurant, to pay for the other people's food in line. That's not something you do in the United States, right? It's considered very awkward. Now, yes, if there's someone's going through, all they got is a packet of gum, you're like, just go, I'll pay for your, like, whatever. That's one thing. But when you're just randomly buying people's groceries, that's weird. Now, I understand here in Nicaragua, most of the people in line are relatively poor, but if they're in a grocery store, they're not that poor, right? You're in the luxury spot. So if you're in a La Colonia or a La Union, the real grocery stores, then you're talking about people who have the ability to go spend a lot of money. So it's a little bit weird to be buying those people things at random. That don't do that, right? Just for everyone, because I don't know where he's going to. Maybe he's in the market and is someone who can barely afford fruit. Yes, help the poorest of poor. Don't help the super rich. Not that we don't want to help them, but don't give money that could have gone to the poor to the super rich. That's a bad place to go. So if you're in like La Colonia, which I go to all the time, absolutely go shop in La Colonia, but don't look at the people who are driving nice cars, who have lots of money, who can afford to go luxury food shopping and be like, I'm going to take care of their bills. Even if you're in a Maxi Pali, you are still in a upmarket place. Now, yes, it would make you be far better there, but you're not dealing with the poorest people. The people you want to be buying food for are the ones who are not in those places, who are going to the mercado, the people who are buying rice and beans, very little else, just some plantains, have to cook everything at home, have to eat the most basic things, are struggling to get chicken. Those are the people who need that help, not the people who are making money off of them, not their bosses, right? And that's a risk. If you're in a grocery store and you're buying for people, you're paying for the engineers, the doctors, the lawyers, the people who own businesses, not the people who work at them in a great many cases, or the people who have really good jobs. So be aware. Like, as we always say, charity is one of the most dangerous, damaging things you can do. You want to help an economy. Go read Dark Star Safari by Paul Thoreau, who worked for Peace Corps, I believe, and went back to Malawi later in life and realized how much damage he had contributed to in the country. Now, of course, that's on an institutional scale. So they literally destroyed countries and empowered warlords. It's very different than just, taking money that could go to the poor and giving it to the rich, making them richer so that they have more power to, own businesses. And it's exactly the opposite of what you want. So always be careful with charity. Right? It's a dangerous mechanism. It makes people become dependent. It makes people see themselves as lesser, and it's a dangerous high for the person who gives it away, because it makes you feel like you are have all this power and you can make a difference, and you can potentially, but you want to do so in a really good, logical way that empowers people to feel good about themselves and to have a future that they're able to do those things. Not just giving out gifts. That's a one-time thing. It's nice to give presents at Christmas and have that warm and fuzzy. And I'm not saying you shouldn't ever give gifts gifts at Christmas. But what you really want to do, for the most part, is do things that increase the economy so that instead of throwing that money at someone who just gets a treat one time, actually improve their lives, or more importantly, improve the lives of those who truly need the help, those who don't have jobs, those who can't find employment, those who are struggling to buy the food that they need and so forth, rather than those who are not struggling. But yes, it's almost never seen or experienced here. Well, that's why, though. You're in a grocery. Why would a wealthy person give another wealthy person money? It doesn't make sense, right? He said, no, I don't understand this one. My buddy Isaac lived here for almost a year, went broke many times. I don't know what he's saying there. If he went broke, how did he come back? Where's all the money flowing through? Was he really broke if he came back within a year over and over again? I don't think that's really what broke is. Now he says, on the $15,000 budget for a home, we were looking at large acre farms. Well, okay, that wouldn't be $15,000. Now you're talking about buying a business and a large one. The issue, almost every time we found something, the land is pretty expensive. The land is not expensive. You've been gringo priced. There's no place that the land is expensive at all. Like, that's not a thing. There's places where it's super cheap and places where it's just kind of cheap. That's it. Anything that isn't that, they saw you coming. And if you're white and you go to look at the property yourself, you're probably going to get gringo priced. And if you're in the San Juan del Sur area, you're probably going to get gringo priced. So these things are expensive. But it's important to understand these are not, you didn't see the real prices. Land is not expensive. Everyone needs to internalize these things. It's not expensive. If I hear that, any person who's speaking to me, any person I'm involved, they're all confused, they're all misled, or they're trying to trick me. Very important. He said, even finding something out in the country to be that low of a price is almost like they'd be next to a trash dump or an extremely dangerous part of the country. Absolutely untrue. And really, Kevin, I think you need to get out in Nicaragua. Like, this is not at all accurate. You can be in safe neighborhoods. You can be in great neighborhoods. You can be in really nice country areas. I don't think you understand how cheap land is here in Nicaragua. You can easily now, if you want to get a spot, I can get you a spot today to put a $15,000 investment. I know a place on the beach, not on the beach, but you can hear the water. You could, if you had a really, really good baseball arm and the roll of the ball was just right, you could throw a baseball into the water. Okay, so that's not on the beach, but it's not far. It's maybe 2 lots off the beach. Okay, I guess a baseball, I'm thinking it's closer than it is. It's so close you can walk there in just a couple minutes. You can see the water from standing on the roof, okay? I could get you a lot today. It's a tiny lot. It is not a good value. We walked away from it at $4,000. We're like, heck no, totally bad spot. We don't want it. But at $4,000, you could put up a total package, $15,000, so an $11,000 house on a $4,000 lot. And now that we know how bad the lot is, I guarantee you could get it for $3,000, maybe $2,000, right? It's not an acre. It's a tiny spot, but it's just off the beach, right on a corner, on a main road. Like, it's a pretty good location in a safe barrio, but on the edge of it, so you're not even like in the barrio, with open air around and fence on the side from like a public health facility. So it's like a yard that you would have. You don't even have to have your own yard. You could do zero clearance. Like, it's really not that bad. If you were going to put a tiny house on there, you could easily build an $11,000, no yard in this case, $11,000 house right at the beach, put it on a $4,000 lot. And that's really, I guarantee you could get it down to $3,000, then you'd have $12,000 to build the house. You know what I mean? Maybe you can get it down to $2,000 and have $13,000 to build the house. You could do that, right? I looked at one property this week. It was someone brought it to me. I wasn't even out looking. That is the price they tried to hose us with, and that's how cheap it is. So if that's how cheap it is when you're not even trying, and it would meet this requirement for a $15,000 house, if you can't find that when you're out looking in the country, you're being hosed. They saw you coming, and if you're doing things right, you can imagine that if you have a lifestyle where you're, buying people dinner everywhere you go, you're kind of throwing money around, right? These are things that are not done in Nicaragua. It's not really seen as appropriate. This is something that, as an American, this is important that I ask you guys not to do. As North Americans, do not come down. Like, we have the tipping discussion going on as well. Instead, use it to build or to fund someone in a business. You find someone who's really honestly trying to do some good work. He's trying to employ some people. He doesn't have what it takes to start up a business. Use that money to start up a business that actually employs someone and makes a difference, a long-term positive difference in someone's family, who allows their kids to go to school, who allows them to build a future for themselves, who allows them to employ other Nicaraguans and contribute to their community and grow it, right? Don't be afraid to use your money for maximum good, but make sure that it's not for show, and make sure it isn't just a gift. Make sure it actually is being used in a logical way, and require that you get something back. Maybe they pay you back, and maybe you take risks. Well, pay me back when you make money, right? Maybe a tiny bit of interest. Only when they make money. Make sure you're, doing maximum good. But if you do that, help someone build, okay, they're going to build an auto shop. There's no auto shop here. I really want to build one. I don't have the money. Great. Go fund them, right? And when they're doing okay and they're doing better than their neighbors, not a lot better, just a little bit better, say, okay, now you're going to start paying me back. And you have a deal for this, right? Have a contract. And then they've paid you back over time. Then the next person's like, I really want to open a veterinary clinic here, but I don't have the money. Great, do the same thing for them. And now you're using that same money to build wealth over and over again. Now, at some point, someone's going to fail, and that business is going to lose money, and you're not going to get your money back. Great, put more money in if you have the money to do that. There are ways to have a true positive impact that doesn't disrupt the economy, that isn't just a gift that causes people to one time, I'm going to buy everyone expensive apples and just give them away. Okay? And not that that's a terrible thing, but what are you really doing at the end of the day? Are people going to go, wow, now I really want an apple, but now I can't afford one. I can't get that again. All right? That's not necessarily as beneficial as it may seem. Not that giving away an apple is a terrible thing. It's just an example of if we do these one-time things, it's like, one time I tasted an apple, that was cool, but I can't make it part of my diet. It hasn't helped me increase my quality of life. But if you help someone go plant a tree that they really need, in 5 years, maybe it's giving them apples. Okay, it's not here, but maybe it's giving them limes, and now they're able to eat those limes, and that has lowered their cost of food, and they now have a better vitamin C uptake, or whatever. There's just way better ways to do this, and I think it's an important thing that people understand that it really is how you do things, right? Do not think of yourselves as the North American saviors coming to make a big difference. That is always going to turn out wrong. Don't think that we're bringing a bunch of knowledge from North America. We're not, right? That's not here at all, right? That's just a really important thing to consider, that when you're coming down, so many people start with, and nearly everyone, when I spend a lot of time with North Americans who come down, and they care, right? This comes from a place of caring or excitement, right? And they're like, oh, you know what? I have all these ideas from North America. I'm gonna use them here. And anyone who's trying to start a business, this is the same mindset, but one is like in a donation, like charity kind of mindset, or a helping mindset. The other's in making money business mindset, but it's the same underlying thought, and that is that I'm bringing this context from North America. It must be valuable here. The people who live here must not know about basic things from North America. They must not be able to think of basic things. And you can imagine people being like, I'm going to open a video game salon. People are going to come and play video games because I heard they can't afford video games at home. And they don't ask, is this something that's already been solved? Oh my gosh, every neighborhood has one of those. How are you going to compete with the people who are already really good at it, the people who are following models, who have tried and true methodologies, know what people want, know how to advertise? You can't even begin to come close. But people will say, oh, here's a thing I want to do. And when people are saying, oh, I want to open a business, this is a great exercise, right? Ask someone who's interested in business, tell them about Nicaragua, and they'll start saying, ooh, I want to open a business in Nicaragua. They don't have a business idea. They just want a business. And get them to throw out ideas. They will probably throw out ideas that are completely insane as fast as you can get them to talk. And this happens every time I talk to anybody. So this is a universal thing. This is no one person being crazy. This is what humans do when confronted with this. And they'll just start throwing out business ideas that are probably weak in the United States, or they would have already done them. But here in Nicaragua, they're missing all of the context as to why it would be good, why it would work, why someone would be interested, what people are already doing, what niche it's trying to fill, and so forth. And that's important to understand. On the business side, you can't just come in blind and say, I'm just going to open business and magically it's going to work. That doesn't work anywhere, especially not in a market you know nothing about. But the same thing that happens on the other side. I'm going to come and I'm going to provide this help. Oh, they must not know how to do something. And the things that you generally come up with are exactly things that they know probably just as well or better, and are very common knowledge, and people would be completely shocked to learn that you thought they didn't know how to do those things. So to come back to the original topic, I think that there is a lot of misunderstanding. Living in San Juan del Sur and being gringo priced in a lot of things, I think Kevin has a very skewed view as to what things can and do cost here in Nicaragua. He says he administers to poor communities and they see a lot of houses for $15,000, but I think he's not understanding that what he's seeing is houses are probably $1,000 to $3,000. At $15,000, people are living in gated communities, and I mean that. We're talking about places with security guards, with gates and so forth. These are nice residencias. They're not fancy see, of course, we're talking about the rock bottom within the lowest cost residencias. But that's what we're talking about. And Marcela from the show, we recently turned down buying her old house. It was an option to buy it before she gave it up because she moved to Leon. But the house that she had, and we've shown it on the show, and we've shown the neighborhood. You guys have seen it's gated, guard at the gate. 2-bedroom, 1-bath, very small place, big backyard, room for a car, not a garage, just a spot to put a car on the side. Beautiful plants out front, enough that she could do laundry out back. She could have a garden. She didn't put one in, but she could have had a very nice backyard garden back there, or created a backyard. That's not something she was interested in, but certainly could have. She had plenty of space on the side to do something even beyond where the car was, or replace where the car was with something else because she didn't have a car. But she was in a very nice community. Her houses next door were attractive. A lot of them were slightly larger, but hers was 21,000. So it's, of course, that percentage-wise, that's a lot more than 15. But that was in a gentrified neighborhood, directly across the street from a pizza shop, next to a shopping plaza. Very nice area with all these accoutrements. Not as nice as what Kevin's talking about in San Juan del Sur, but a very nice place. Walking distance to very affluent areas where brand new houses are being sold just like that. So this is a very important context to understand that this is how Nicaraguans live every day. And so people who are getting those kinds of houses, that's not the poor. Those are the entry-level middle class. And so when you're going out in the country and you're finding these terrible little places, or you're in places that are dangerous, you're in places that you're really worried about living in, because I would live in places that are 20,000. Right now, they don't have enough space for my dogs. They don't have enough space for my office and my studio. But from a quality of life, they are certainly far nicer than many places that I've lived in the United States. Places that I have lived that I was willing to spend money to live in. And so when you're getting out in the country, these places are far less expensive. They may quote a higher price because they're trying to sell you on something. They want to make it sound better. But the actual price of selling some dangerous place, if you're in the city, you're expecting that to be way under 15,000, unless it's really large, right? And then you're getting like a lot that could be used as a business, and it's got 6 bedrooms or something. Of course, that's going to be more. But that's a very, very important context. So there's both sides. Those who are looking for the most extreme cheap places, often they're forgetting just what that would entail. But if you have money and you're spending money in Nicaragua, often it's so encouraging that your money goes so far that you're going to spend it in ways that make it seem like your budget's really big. And that's fine. If your budget is your budget and you're letting your money drive your spending, that's fine. It's your money. Let's say you have $10,000 a month and you can spend it in the U.S. It's going to get you one thing, and Nicaragua is going to get you another thing. But you've defined the budget, and then you're just spending what you can. And I totally understand. That's how Americans are taught to live, right? We don't put money aside. We don't save. We just live as much as we're able to. And it doesn't matter what we need for our lives. And so if that's the mindset you're coming with, or the financial picture that you're coming with, then of course your budget will remain the same. You're just upping your lifestyle to match your budget. So of course you get to live in a mansion, you get to have an ocean view, you get to take people out to eat, you get to go to fancy restaurants on a regular basis, you don't have to cook at home, you can have a car and drive and do vacation-y stuff all the time. And yes, gas is more expensive per mile, but the amount that you need to drive to do things is much less. And you have public transportation that is safe and cheap and convenient, that you generally don't have in the United States. When I lived in Dallas, I couldn't take the bus reasonably to go anywhere. It would be expensive and dangerous, but here, I totally do, because that's how things work here. You have to adapt, and when you adapt, you're going to get way more for your money. So I think on both sides, it's important to understand you can come to Nicaragua and have this luxurious experience to spend money, and you can come and be cheap. And there's a whole bunch of happy medium where I think most people should be. If you're coming from the United States and you're used to spending $10,000 a month, try reducing that to $5,000 a month and see if you can't live better with some adaptation, right? Don't try to completely recreate your American lifestyle, but recreate the parts that matter. If you are coming and you have this mindset of, I want to save every penny possible, maybe look at not saving every possible penny, but try to figure out how you can live frugally and adapt and save a lot of money, but not go so extreme that you feel like you've become a pauper, right? You probably don't want to come from an existence in North America and reduce yourself to poverty in Nicaragua. Now, of course, if you do that, presumably whatever income you have that's spare will accumulate and you'll have more buying power, and that will help itself in the future. But you know what I'm saying. Pushing it too far just because a number can be done doesn't mean that you want to pursue it. And likewise, just because you can spend the money doesn't mean you just want to spend it. So I think on both sides of the spectrum, we have some rationality, and we want to push people towards the middle. The average person coming to Nicaragua probably wants to spend between $30,000 and $150,000. Above 150, you're starting to get into the cost of really outrageously big things that, sure, if you have a lot of money, could make sense. But in general, it's not going to. And if you're getting below 30, you're starting to get into scrimping and saving so extremely that it's probably going to be more of a hardship than you really want. And so there's a reasonable number, and it's just don't lose your mind and just go crazy. Remember, it's a functional economy, it's a normal place, and while everything is lower cost than in the United States and far lower cost than you believe, and you should never trust anyone who tells you things are going to cost like they're going to cost in the US for an equivalent thing, then just use rationality and say, okay, there's no way that it's going to be cheaper than the cost of wood to build a house. There's no way that it's going to be free for labor. Like, obviously, those things aren't going to happen, but that's what people start to think. And never think that is a premium beach location going to be just as cheap as a wilderness jungle location that nobody wants. Of course not. Anything that you want, someone else wants too, so it's going to cost a little bit more than the place that they don't want. But you can make it work. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ScottAlanMiller. You can go to GoFundMe to help out Marcela, who has stage 4 Hodgkin lymphoma. We are helping raise money for her cancer, not treatments, but all the things that go along with that, the extra food and travel and childcare and such that a single mother going through stage 4 cancer needs to get through her 6 months of treatments and then 3 months of continuing treatments for lung tumors. And we also have a join button if you want to join the community. Of course, get down, ask your questions, leave your comments, send in video questions, email us, anything you need to know for contact is all down in the show notes, and I will see all of you tomorrow.